Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Indigenous Voices panel. This is coming to you as part of the Arizona International Film Festival, and also as a joint collaboration with the Made in Hawaii Film Festival that's going to be getting underway in Hawaii in May. And we're going to have an interesting session today. We have several filmmakers joining us. Their films were screened last night as part of the Arizona International Film Fest, and they were in the Indigenous Shorts panel. So we're lucky to have, it looks like 3 filmmakers here with us today. So welcome to all of you. And we'll have 2 moderators kind of sharing the asking of questions with and starting the dialogue with our filmmakers today. So our first moderator is Taylour Chang. She's a filmmaker and also the director of public programs and community engagement at Honolulu's Bishop Museum. And I'll be your other moderator. My name's Amy Fatzinger. I'm a professor of American Indian Studies at the University of Arizona and primarily teach courses in Indigenous literature and cinema. And I'm especially interested in Indigenous adaptations, so Indigenous texts that have been adapted for the screen. Before we get on with introducing our filmmakers today, it's a good time to just pause and begin by respectfully acknowledging that even though we're joining from all different places through Facebook and Zoom, where most of us are probably residing on Indigenous lands. So those of us who are here in Tucson respectfully acknowledge that we're on the unceded land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized Native nations, and Tucson more specifically is home to the Tohono and Pasquayaqui nations. So I think Taylour is going to begin some conversation here with the filmmakers, but maybe before we jump right in, we could just have the filmmakers take a moment to introduce themselves and say hello, and then Taylour can start us off. Maybe Luke, if you could get started, if you wouldn't mind. Do you want to begin?
My name is Luke Hunt. I am from, I'm based out in Tucson, Arizona. I'm from the Navajo Nation. I'm just finishing up my degree in film at Pima Community College. And I'm glad to be a part of this.
Great, welcome. And your film Sheep last night was shown in the fest. It was fantastic. I think it got the most laughs from the crowd. It was great. Thanks for joining us. And Déjà, would you mind going next?
Hi, thank you. My name is Déjà Bernhardt, and I grew up in Hawaii, but I was raised all over the world. My family now lives in Indonesia, and I'm in Austin, Texas. My film is Last Hawaiian Sugar, and it's based on a time in my own life growing up on Maui.
Great, thank you. And that was the sort of culminating film last evening, which is really powerful. So thanks for being here. And Keli'i, would you mind just saying hello and introducing yourself as well?
Sure. Aloha mai kako. My name is Keli'i Grace. I am from the island of Oahu, Hawaii. I am a filmmaker, and my film called Ala Moana Boys. Mahalo for having me.
Thanks for joining us. So as we get started here, we'll just begin by having some conversation, and Taylour and I will ask some questions and hope to hear some great dialogue with the filmmakers. And for those of you who are joining us through Zoom or Facebook, if you've got questions for the filmmakers as well, just go ahead and type them into the chat. We'll be keeping an eye on that during this session, and then we'll save some time for questions from the audience toward the end. So just type them in any time you like, and we'll keep an eye on that throughout the session. So I'll turn it over to you, Taylour.
Thank you, Amy. And aloha mai kako. I'm based in Kaimuki in Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm calling from Keli'i right now. And I just want to acknowledge, we're in the land of Kanaka Oiwi, and just really honored to be here with everybody, and looking forward to this conversation. And so, just to kind of get this round robin style talk story session started, if maybe all the filmmakers, if you could just briefly introduce your film, the inspiration behind it, and why this story. So I guess we'll kind of I'll go back to Luke, if you wouldn't mind sort of starting us here.
Okay, yeah. Sheep was heavily inspired by my grandmother. She would tell me stories. This story in particular would happen to be one of, the story is, it's my, can't remember him. He was I'm sorry for, I can't really remember the relationship that I had with him. He was just, and my auntie's past boyfriend, yeah. And he came back home and he told me that he needed to get some sheep in, and he just wanted to just try to be as polite and sincere. That's kind of what's expected of you when you go to your grandmother's or in-laws' house on the res. So that's kind of how the story happened, and there's many other stories that she tells me and that I take inspiration from. But this one in particular, I just loved it, and it just happened to attract me. And it's kind of those problems you don't hear about when, as in particular, when you're herding sheep. You don't think you're gonna run into this problem in particular. I have myself actually done this once, and so it can be frustrating at times. I was frustrating at that time, but it's something that you don't think that's ever gonna happen to you when you think you know your own sheep. So that's how happened. That's how the story was made, and I filmed it during the pandemic of 2020 with a cast and crew of 4, family made, my mom, girlfriend, and my grandma. And that's about it, as much as I can give you a little. If there's any more questions detailed, I can happily let you know. But I can remember that was all that was asked, right?
Yeah, no, beautiful. Oh my gosh, thank you. Maybe we can go to Déjà.
Hi. So my film is Last Hawaiian Sugar, and it's based on a part of my own life growing up in Maui. Like I said, I lived on Maui until I was about a little older than 10, yeah, about 10 and a half. And I lived on the east side of Maui. I went to haiku school, and I grew up playing in the irrigation ditches there that fed the sugarcane farms with my younger brother, Noel. It was a really big part of our lives. I had a really happy childhood. I was also seriously abused when I was younger by my stepfather. So the character Nua is based on my own story. And I first wrote this story as a feature, and I've been kind of working with it for a few years, and then I decided to make the short. And the character definitely changed a lot in casting, but it is based on a part of my own life. And Last Hawaiian Sugar, you know, what happened to me in Hawaii and why we ended up having to leave made such a big impression on me as a child and in my adult life and as a storyteller. This real sense of displacement, having to leave my home. And when I thought back to my childhood and started writing, it was the connection that I had with the land was so profound that I think that's where kind of the angle of, you know, sugarcane farming came on. I didn't grow up on a sugarcane farm. I lived in a school bus. You know, my parents were hippies. We lived way out, busting really far to go to school. But those, you know, the East Maui irrigation, my brother and I would take our boogie boards and we would swim in them, even though we were told never to do that. So it was kind of like our little escape and our secret that we had. And so when I sat down to write, it was a big part of it. And we played in the sugarcane fields too, much like the character Nua does. But I began to think about all the people that had been brought to Hawaii for sugarcane farming, starting in about 1800 and about 1802, and really diversified and changed the ethnic makeup of Hawaii, and also displaced, you know, generations of Hawaiians from their own land. So it was a really complicated subject, because when the last mill, which was the Pu'unene sugar mill, the one that we drove by every day when we were kids, finally closed, it was after I had started writing this story, but it was so profound for me when I heard that it was closing. And when I started working with actors and to see that how emotional it was for them, just to kind of go back and think about everything that was involved and where their histories came from. Like working with Steve Iwamoto, for example, when he started, he was in the ditch doing the scene with Philomena, the actress who plays Nua, and he started to realize that his grandparents, had worked there, and it was so emotional for him. So the correlation between the abuse of the individual and the abuse of the land, and also what a global, issue this is right now, and we just really can't disconnect the two. So we ask ourselves, how are we capable of doing this to our Mother Earth? But what happens to us at a really young age? It shapes who we are and the violence that we can cause each other or ourselves or the land that we live on. So that was my desire and my sort of thread for making this. And I hope that wherever people are, that they can see a part of themselves and their histories and the choices they make, and how they choose to heal that in Nua's character and find some strength in it.
Mahalo nui, Déjà. This is such a powerful film. It really translates, in the work that you do. And Keli'i, I'll pass it to you.
Hi. So my film is named Alamoana Boys. It's about 5 young boys in the 1930s that were wrongfully accused of a rape. So this is based on a true story. The 5 boys, they weren't actually calling themselves the Alamoana Boys. The media called them that. And the term local wasn't necessarily a good thing back in those days. The group actually called themselves the Ku'uluvela Boys. But I decided to make the film Alamoana Boys because what I've seen as far as content being created with stories of our people have been created outside or from outside people, outside entities. So I felt this had to be told from a Native perspective, somebody that is as close to these boys in real life as possible. While I didn't have to go through those tragedies that they did growing up, I did have similar experiences personally. I grew up in a place called Hawai'i, which is, there's not a lot of people that look like me there, even though it's, Oahu, where there are Hawaiians. I was in a part of the island where there was a lot of haole, a lot of white people, a lot of Japanese people. All my friends were Asian, and I was the only dark-skinned guy, the only guy that's above 5'8" in height. So I lived very closely to what these boys, I think not in the same comparison, but I felt that it was only right for me to tell a story like this and to begin conversation. So the biggest part about creating this film was to create conversation and to begin healing, because one of the main boys actually got murdered, and the murderers got away with it. And we can go more into detail, but yeah, that's the overall reason why I decided to create Alamoana Boys.
Mahalo, Keli'i.
The question I had was actually going to be for everyone, but it really just follows up so nicely with what you just shared. Maybe you would like to begin on this one, and then others might like to chime in. But one of the things we're kind of discussing in relation to this panel is that it seems like over the past 5 years or so, opportunities for Indigenous storytellers and creators has been expanding somewhat. And I wonder if you personally see a correlating increase in interest in your own work, or maybe an easier time for support, or finding an audience for your stories, or resources to tell your stories right now.
Yeah, I definitely feel that there's more support in receiving these stories. I've been in touch with uh, creating this type of content for a while, but decided to go in more of like a film sort of outlet. A lot of my work was either commercial or documentary. But to tell certain stories like of this, where it's a true story of the past and not a lot of information or, media coverage, you'd have to recreate that. So I think this platform of film is a perfect way to recreate these stories. It's a very new thing in Hawaii to create narrative uh, pieces. The community in the past hasn't been so receptive of it. I think because everyone is used to the documentary format, where it's real information, real photos, real people speaking about it. But you're actually, it's a hard job as a director, because everything is on you. There's no one on the side speaking for you. It's you, and it's your response. It's a really big responsibility. But I do feel that there is a lot more support than the past, for sure.
It's good to hear that there's steps in the right direction then, at least. Deja, I wonder if you've had a similar experience, and also, seeing more interest and more support or resources, perhaps, or if your experience is similar or different from Keli'i's.
Yes, absolutely. There's been, and just like you said, in the last 5 years, there has definitely been an outpouring of, oh, okay, we want to hear your voice, and what's your story, and how can we support it? And really, it started actually going back home to Hawaii for me, with Hawaii International Film Festival, Creative Lab, and then Ohina Labs, getting support there, and Pacific Islanders in Communication. And then and with that, then I started to get support back here on the mainland through Austin Film Society and Santa Fe Film Institute, and now through y'all, and there has been a big shift from my perspective. And like Keli'i, I also come from a documentary background, so telling stories also from my own voice and from my own experience. Everything I write about is always from my own life, or from those who I love, or sometimes inspired by my documentary work. But it seems that there's more of an interest and support now.
That's such good news. I think my students will be so excited to hear this. And Luke, I actually have more questions for you. I saw in your director's statement that you worked with a zero budget, which I'm sure my students would love to know how to get a film done with a zero budget. But in the meantime, I just wonder if you want to weigh in on this question that the others have been speaking to, if you're also finding more support and resources and audience that's interested in your films lately.
Yes, I have found a ton more of support and Indigenous content being created. But it all comes down to the foundation, the layout from Wes Studi, Sony Skyhawk, and Gregory Cruz, the native actors who persevered when people didn't want to see us on screen. They persevered, and it also reminds me of like I remember reading a comment about the reason why the head runner of 60 Minutes did not include natives in his program was because they had so much to say. And sorry, I'm getting a little emotional right now. Going through a little rough week right now. But like during those times, like early from the 60s to just recently to 2010, there wasn't as much support from it. And during those times, I think those native actors, male and female, who persevered, laid out the support they persevered, and that is why we're seeing the support and so much growth in Native filmmakers from like as of 2015 on to now.
That's so good to hear. I think my students are feeling like they're starting to come into the industry during an exciting time rather than a time of, struggle, that it's starting to change a little bit. That's great to hear. Thanks so much for sharing.
Mhm.
And you've all mentioned different ways in which the making of the film has connected with community in some way, and so I kind of wanted to allow you all to maybe sort of share a little bit more about how your experience in making your films impacted the community in which you were situated in, and yeah, if you have any thoughts and experiences to share about how you've seen your film, either the making of your film or the the screenings of your films impact community or community building in different ways. So I guess I'll pass it to Déjà first for this one.
It's an interesting question. I mean, on a personal level, the film, when I premiered the film, some girls that I grew up with came to see it with me, and the questions that I had from them, or the response was, we knew that this was happening, that this was happening to you. We knew that this was happening to you when we were 10. We knew when we were 8. We knew. And it just was so surprising to me, I guess. It made us all kind of, go back and think and wonder how it happened, and how it could just abuse. I mean, it's so prevalent everywhere. But it seemed like in the community that I grew up in, and that this film is about, that it was incredibly prevalent. All the actresses that I worked with had something to say about it too. Like Cisa Gray, for example, was very, very interested in the project. She said that she had experienced almost being abused in this way, and that the people closest to her had all been abused too, and that it was in her, where she's from in Samoa, that it was very just a really bad situation there too. So she wanted to be part of it, and we all the women sat around. There's a scene where they're stripping the cane, and it's just women, where Nua tries to tell her mother about the abuse, and we all sat down for that scene because it was just women in that scene, and we all kind of talked about where we came from. We called in our ancestors. We talked about how the film hit home for us in different ways, and it was really incredible how similar our experiences were. So as far as the impact on the community further down the road, I hope that it continues to have an impact, and that I'll be able to make the feature, and that people can see themselves in Nua, or even in the other characters, and find strength and their own voice. Not just if they were victims, but also as storytellers too.
Absolutely. Maybe Keli'i, if you want to go next.
Yeah. As far as impact in the community goes, I knew that would be an important part of creating this film, just because it's like ripping a Band-Aid off. The tragedy that did happen, of course, we get reminded, but to relive that in a visual way, to actually see that person get killed, because there's only newspaper articles. So for people that knew about it, it was really difficult, I think. So the struggle I had was creating this piece and making sure that people weren't stuck in this deep hole that you might get put into. So as a community, I wanted to bring people in that could help me with that, not only with the film, but with discussions. And we're still having a lot of discussions around these tragedies that still happen today in recent years, like last year sort of thing here, it's still happening. So the conversations will still keep going, but to learn about it, I think, for our upcoming generations, and to not take it as this was a sad story, but really this boy at the time, he really took it for everyone for the future, and to make sure it's at top of mind, and to create conversations, to create healing, and to not be afraid, I think, to share. With Deja's film, without even knowing it was a true story, I kind of felt it, and then when I got to meet her up at the Q&A, I could just feel that. So that connection is really strong when you create something, a film of this sort of level, this sort of spiritual level. It's kind of difficult. It takes a lot of different protocols to get into that space, and even after, we can still be affected by it. I still cry after I watch that film, on my film, and I'm sure all the filmmakers have to go through that. But yeah, it helps to have that community, though. It helps to have that community of people to support, and just make sure everyone's safe, because we are entering territory that's really you have to be careful. These filmmakers, I think they're chosen, and to take on this kuleana, or this responsibility, and it's for life. It's not something that we just create and then we're done, on to the next. This stays with us. And like Deja's story, that's her story, her own personal story. My story is not my own personal, but I did take on the kuleana of telling someone else's story, but I have to hold that forever. So these are really, you need that community for sure to do something like this.
Mahalo for very beautifully, expressing, that the collective healing that's needed, especially when, as filmmakers and storytellers, that we're healing trauma by reenacting it, and in different ways, and yes, it is a very dangerous territory, but with community discourse and conversation, and not feeling like you're the only one carrying that emotional weight is so key, and especially in Indigenous storytelling practices. Luke, I want to please share your thoughts on this sort of topic, and how maybe community factors into your process as well.
Yes, the community. It's very you get both. I'll just focus on the positive. They're very my grandma in particular. She was very open to doing. She's this is my other grandmother. She lives just down the road from me. Still the same road. Focusing on her. I told her. I was also shooting a documentary in Delcon, my hometown, 45 miles north of Winslow. I told her I was a filmmaker, and I got her interested into being a part of my film, because she knew the documentary subject I was filming about, and she wanted to be a part of it. So I said, okay, can I get you into my film? She had no problem agreeing. And then it just kind of switched to her being like very active in the community. And I'm in Tucson, still finishing up my degree. She would let people know like, oh, I was in this film. My grandson, is a filmmaker, and she would let them know what I was doing, my purpose in life. Like, she was really proud of what I was seeking towards, and she would spread that out to the community by herself. And it retracted into the documentary subject. I'm also working about this veterinarian who's from Oklahoma, who's been living on the Navajo Nation, Hopi Navajo Nation, for 40 years. And she's been very engaging into the community. It's a very one-to-one or very lenient relationship on both sides. I'll talk more about that one later. But that was actually how I was able to make it no budget, was because I would go to Delcon. I would leave from Tucson to Delcon on the weekends to go film her. And then when she wasn't busy, when she didn't have no clients, I would head back home and film what I can for the day, because we couldn't shoot all day. We only shot during the weekend, so we only shot specific times of the day for the continuity. And yeah, I just think if you put the same work and the same method into your work as with the actors, they'll also do what's right, and talk about your work in the community. Overall, people just want to see other people succeed, and that's I guess that's one of the goals in life, is just growth, and that's all everybody wants to see. So the community is always very open to seeing for this type of development, especially in the film industry, because at times we would just see natives laugh at natives because we knew they weren't natives. And now we can actually appreciate natives on screen.
And I love how you mentioned how integral, our families are in the making of our films, maybe even more so, in non-native contexts, like our genealogies and our immediate families are so integral to, how we produce our work. So mahalo nui for that. I'll pass it to Amy.
So this is a question that I think my film students would love to hear. I know some of them are actually here in the session. My students talk a lot about how good practices while making the film and the process of making the film often result in a better product at the end. So I wonder if you found that to be true in your own filmmaking experience, whether with the films that were screened last evening or maybe with other films that you've worked on. So maybe things like building relationships with the community that you're filming in, or getting permission first, or just building those relations that are, and that reciprocity that's so important in Indigenous contexts. I just wonder if you've had any experiences like that you could share, and maybe I know there's some students listening, maybe for some good advice for young filmmakers that are looking for advice on best practices when just doing the process of the film work behind the scenes. Maybe Déjà, maybe would you mind starting on that one?
Yes, I'd love to. So something that came to my mind when you were just talking is during when I originally wrote Nua's character, her name was Noe, and Noelani, and she was going to be Samoan and Japanese. And so through casting, that did not happen. There was not an actress that was Samoan and Japanese. And we had lots of wonderful actresses, and Philomena Vaifale was certainly by far, the Noe when we cast her. And then we cast her parents around her ethnicity, or her mother and her stepfather. And then CISA came on. And so working with CISA was really great for me because then Nua was Samoan. We changed her name, and working with CISA helped me to understand as a non-Samoan what I needed to change and what we needed to consider before we shot. So we had a really short amount of time. We shot during COVID. So we shot in June 2021, and we only met on the first day on set because of COVID. In person. We rehearsed online, of course, on Zoom, but all casting, everything was done over Zoom. So just, really for me, it was really about listening. And she said, this is not what I would do as a Samoan, and then taking that into consideration and then going back and forth. And then also working with Philomena, the young actress who's 12, with some really heavy material. And she's, thank God, never gone through anything like that in her life. But the best practices there is that I can say as a fellow filmmaker and also as a teacher for other filmmakers is really strengthen your ties with the parents when you work with child actors. And then whoever you're working with, whatever their background is, like for me, working with another Indigenous ethnicity was really important for me to understand what they would do and what hit home for them, and allowing them to come in, almost as a writer and really help me. So, and then back to working with Philomena, just, it took some time on set to help her understand what it would feel like to be an abused child. And to help her get to that place. And through that experience, it was really powerful for me because I realized that trying to direct somebody to what I had gone through, I realized that I really hadn't dealt with what I thought I had dealt with. It was, kind of mind blowing actually to be back in Hawaii. I had left there, as a child, and I felt obviously very heartbroken and sad that I lost my home and my community and all my friends and everything, and went to this new place, and then all of a sudden I'm living in on the mainland and then in Bali, and have virtually no connection. But going back and working with her was so powerful for me, just to watch her sort of try to make these connections and to talk to her about what it felt like. I really started to realize how what I didn't quite understand as a child, and what I was starting to even just like unpack as a director and as a person. So, best practices. Really listening to the people who you're making your film about. We had an all AAPI cast, or Asian and Pacific Islander cast. We had 100% Indigenous lead cast. And I worked with Moses Goods on the Hawaiian song that I researched, the Pua Manano. And so that was the original resistance song sang by the Hawaiians when they were resisting the labor that they were forced to do. And then the Hole Hole Bushi was the Japanese resistance song that the women sang. And so we were really lucky to be able to get, Moses, and we had also some cultural advisors. So working with cultural advisors is also important, and researching, and then just really listening and having an open heart and be willing to change if you need to. I think that's the most important best practice you can have, is just to have an open heart and to be curious and be willing to allow your story to unfold in the way that is correct and supportive to everybody who's involved and the audience that, you know, and to the story itself. Does that make sense? I hope so.
It does. It does. It sounds like a good filmmaker needs to begin by being a good human, really, being a good listener, having good relationships. And yeah, thank you very much. Luke, would you like to speak to that question as well?
Yes, it was about best methods or practices, right?
Yeah, so if you could think a little bit about maybe best practices behind the camera and how that results in a good product in the end, if you have any thoughts about that.
Yes. Well, before you even press the record button, you have to commit. You have to commit to everything. I mean, you don't have to be having the a high-end budget. You just have to be willing to find if a problem, obstacle comes up to you, you have to figure out what's next. It's just like playing chess. I grew up playing chess in high school, and I always think of that when something comes up, when the AD, or when you had to, or think about my other production, but when you come across a problem, you head on first, or someone tells you, your first think is just what's next, what are you gonna have to do? So it's just ultimately what's your next move, how you gonna move forward. A lot of the things, best practices, best method I would say is always write down what you have. That will keep you in handy. I actually had to, for one of the scenes, I forgot my headband. So I had to drive all the way, I had to drive back, which is on the dirt road, it was about 5 miles. That's how far we live off the road. And we were on E. I didn't even think to get gas. And I knew exactly I had to have this headband in the shot. I couldn't afford not to. So one of the good things is write down what you have. What I'm finding in my documentary, with my documentary about Dr. Ruby, is just always let the before I turned on the camera with her, I knew her already, but I told her exactly what I was planning on doing. That I wanted to share her story. I told that the reason why I wanted to share it was because I felt like she was a hidden gem inside this reservation, which is also in awe. Once yeah, that's the idea of it. Once you're gonna see the landscape shots I've tried to capture in it, you're gonna see this hidden gem within a gem. And I think just have a good relationship. I know you're not always gonna have, like Déjà said, she met her actor on day one. For me, I would just always just have an open relationship with everybody, let them know like what's, even to the minimalist person, never treat anybody like so smaller than yourself. Even if you're the headshot director, writer, always treat everybody with respect, like keep a valid opinion of someone. Ask people what they think of something, because they might have an open view that you didn't see. And that can, like as we mentioned, directors are good listeners. They are people observers. They know how to, they tell stories based off of watching people. They have a good, my grandpa told me that you have a good sense of seeing the best in people. And you also got to find the worst in people and show how to get them from worst to best, that character arc. And I think that's one of the, I forgot where I was going with it, but that's one of the best methods to do, is just always be open-minded, and always keep, when I think of something happens, something bad happens, I always think of Deadpool's voice saying maximum effort, give it your maximum effort. And that's what I do, and that's all you can hope for, the best. There's gonna be times where, even golden hour, timing, you're not gonna get that shot, but it's okay, it's not the end of the world, just go on to the next thing. Something might provide better. You have the sunrise, so don't get too mad. So if something doesn't go your way. So that's one of the best ways I've been dealing with problems that come my way.
Excellent. Sounds like it's been working out pretty well for you as well. So thanks so much for sharing. And Keli'i, when I was asking that question, I think I saw you actually nodding already when I was asking about practices. So I thought maybe you might have something to say about that one as well.
Practices, I would just say, just keep filming whatever you can. People come up to me and ask me, I've had, there was a, thinking of my friend right now. People will come up to me and ask like, what can I do? And I just tell them like, just film. I've saw like enough YouTube videos and I got sick of being told you can do it. Go out there and film. Literally just go out there and film. It can just be a rack focus of a tree leaf to the sky. Just get out there and find your film angles, find what's interesting. Try to tell a story with no words. Try to make a montage of life. Adam McKay, I like how he did his on Don't Look Up, of all the montage of life and like around the world, like as the world was ending, the comment. So just go out there and film. Literally, that's all you can do, and something will pop up. That's why they call it movie magic. Something will come up.
That's great. Thank you so much, Luke. I really appreciate that. Keli'i, did you also want to weigh in on that question?
Yeah, sure. I think I can just speak on behalf of my experience with Ala Moana Boys. Best practices for me approaching this film was, I think, the research, because it was a true story. And I knew that the families of these boys that it affected some were still around. So I think all the work was in pre-production, was in trying to figure out, first, if this is okay to tell this story. I had to visit the grave of the young man that got murdered, ask permissions over several different times. We had to create different protocols beforehand to make sure that everyone was safe going into this film, because we were shooting a death scene. We did tone down the death scene because we didn't want to affect people too much, because how he got killed was not the way it was described in the newspaper. Was not really, it was really bad, and we didn't want to depict that too accurate. So there was some changes that we had to make, and with narrative film, trying to balance that narrative side and the sort of documentary side, I think you have to balance that so that people can still understand but not be so upset that you didn't include certain things. So with budget restraints, time restraints, this was during COVID as well. We had to bring a whole community in, like a lot of people that I had to call and ask for favors. So really building trust, I think, is the biggest thing for me, moving into creating as an Indigenous storyteller, because these are stories that will affect all these people that you're talking about. And this will go to people that don't know who these people are. So you have to build the trust first to be able to tell these stories. I've wanted to do this for a long time when I was younger. And my parents are like, no, you can't do that. Like, I could technically do it. I had the skill with cameras and all that stuff, but they're like, no, you cannot. So only recently did I understand that I had to gain certain knowledge to then be in that position to tell the story, to be in that director position. I could support somebody else that was already at that position at the time, but I wasn't ready to be that person to tell the story. So building trust, gaining the knowledge, not just using a camera though. You really have to navigate some difficult waters when you're doing these stories. So I think just always being open to learning from your kupuna, your ancestors. Like Luke said, he has a lot of family that he looks to. It's the same with any storyteller of that nature. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot of different things, but that's what I had to deal with All I Want Boys.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of young filmmakers might not realize the responsibility involved, or someone who's coming in from outside the community doesn't understand that. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Sorry, there's one more thing also that comes to mind with responsibility. With these young filmmakers, it's so easily accessible now with TikTok, Instagram, all these platforms that you can just put out whatever you want. I think it's important to teach these young filmmakers that you can't take back what you put out. So you need to be sure that whatever you put out, it's out there forever, especially now. Like, it's going to be out there, and it can be deleted, but someone could save it. Someone could send it somewhere else, and that's your stamp. So you have to make sure that when it goes from your head out to the screen, it's a huge responsibility, huge.
That's such a good point. Once it's out there, it's hard to, you can't call it back, like you say. So yeah, very, very powerful. So we wanted to make sure we have time to ask a question or two from the audience here as well. So if you don't mind hearing some from other listeners here. We have a question here about the collaboration process. And I think this might be a question actually for all of you. So the question is, what is your collaboration process like? And do you always rely on the same collaborators or engage new people for different projects? And maybe what do you look for in a collaborator? What makes a strong collaborator? Let's see, so, Keli'i, you went last, last question. Do you want to take this one right away?
Sure, I'll make it short so everybody can speak. For collaborators, it's just like-minded people who are moving towards the same goal in whatever you're creating. I think that's really important. And that's how you naturally, I think, get collaborators when they hear about what you're trying to create and they want 100% in on it, whether it be, if there's no budget, high budget, whatever. I think all of us do this for the love of filmmaking. And that's how I look for collaborators. And really, I think the collaborators find me most of the time. When you put it out into the universe, people will find each other. And that's how I met one of my producers, Zoe, who's with us right now. Really fortunate. Every project that I go on, I meet really great people. And yeah, just be open, I think. Be open to new people and not stick with the same. You have your core people, but be open to new people as well.
Great, thanks so much. Déjà, did you want to speak to collaborators that you work with and how they might vary from project to project, or what you look for when you're finding a collaborator?
Yeah, I think the project kind of chooses who's going to be on it too. Of course, there's people that I always work with. I worked with some of the same post-production people, but since I had never made a film in Hawaii, it was really important for me to have a crew all from Hawaii. And it just, in the end, it turned out to be the people that connected with the story. I mean, that it was Gerard came on as my producer, Gerard Elmore. He really believed in it from day one. And also Darren Kaneshiro from Ohina Labs and Ann Misawa. So working with Ann was like a dream come true. I had wanted to have her as my DP for my feature film because of her work on Treeless Mountain, and kind of dreamed of working with her. And then I was at Ohina Labs, and I had just come from New York. I was really exhausted and, like on a red eye, and there was a cocktail mixer, and she came up and introduced herself. And she just said, "I love your writing. Don't ever change. It's so poetic." And we just started talking about, poetics and writing, and just immediately hit it off. But I had no idea who she was. And by the end of the 2-day lab, and they were like, "Oh, thank you, Anne, for judging. This is Ann Misawa." And I was like, wait a second. So it was just such a blessing, like the universe just brought her there. And Anne was like my therapist on set. And she really just, held my hand the whole way through. And that is what you look for in a collaborator, and anybody that you bring onto the project. You just want you want somebody that believes in your story, that understands it, that gets it. And not everybody that I have worked with will get every story that I make. I certainly know that. It might not be the right project for them, but I'll have them give feedback or something. I still continue to work with my collaborators in other ways. Um, but it also, the other thing is you want people that can create a healthy and like a meaningful set, because like going off what Keli'i was saying about what we're putting out there, what we're also creating and manifesting. And it takes so much to do all these films, whether it's time, money, blood, sweat, tears, everything. But we oftentimes act like we're saving lives or something, and we are doing this really important, beautiful thing, don't get me wrong, but we have to treat each other nicely. We have to still remember that it's so hard to make these films, and we have to be able to smile and respect each other on set, and the story will come out better. That's what I believe, if the people who are making it are happy and the set is happy.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. And Luke, I think your situation is a little unusual in your most recent film because your collaborators sound like they were mostly your immediate family. So you could either speak to that or maybe other films you worked on with collaborators. But do you have any thoughts about that question about collaboration?
Yes. Well, the first one, my family helped me with that. They were all new to it, and as they were learning it as I was learning it too, practicing what I learned. My collab, they were very open to what I had to say. They listened to what I had to say. I didn't even bring a tripod, and my girlfriend was the camera holder, and she was the one holding the camera all the time, very steady hands. I did have a collaboration with the shirt I was wearing, 3R Design. They're a graphic artists, 3 generations of grandfather, father, and son drawing art, and they've established, or they put a spin on the Star Wars movies where they and twist it with indigenous, have it with an indigenous twist. So the shirt I was wearing was I think a Che Vader. There's like a Darth Vader as like a, oh no, Darth Vader with looking into with in his eyes had the reflection of Shiprock, which is a holy mountain, very sacred mountain in the Navajo Nation tradition, which explains my opening shot, why I had it milepost 66 was to order 66 with the shirt I was wearing. I'm on the end of reaching out to other people, or I met him because I was starting out as a vendor. I also get upcycled ribbons or upcycled jumpers, and I put ribbons on them and I sell them, as well as take bandanas and then turn them into pillows. And I help my grandma quilt or make quilts. And I was starting out as a vendor, and I met him, and I told him I bought his shirt. And then a couple months down the line, I said, I'm also a filmmaker. I reached out to him, told him I want to make you a film, or I want to put your shirt in my film. And he was all game for it. So now there's also, so I'm reaching out to other people. It's both sides. People, I let them know. They come to me as a vendor. I let them know I'm a filmmaker, and they want to include their business. They want, because they never met a brown filmmaker, and having all the gear, seeing my camera, because I'm documenting myself doing the vending life, and they see that and they want to collaborate with me. So I've had a family from Mexico who transports that grows coffee beans in Mexico and transports it across the Hawai'i border, and they sell it their own. They've done that for many generations. They're the only ones that do in the U.S., and as well as helping a graffiti artist, mural painter, who's also heading down to Pine Ridge, South Dakota. He wants me to document him, and I'm on the other end too, reaching out to other people, Indigenous design, the first native shoemaker having like a spin with the moccasins. So it gives and goes. So you have to be willing to, I like to hear people's stories, and I want to tell other people's stories too. So it comes down to good company too, as well. As same shares with goals too. Like I'll scratch your back if you scratch my back. It's just helping each other, and that's the kind of what the collaboration is about. And good company, that's what I like about it.
All right, thanks. Y'all had some different perspectives on that. Thanks so much for sharing.
And what I love hearing is, I mean, oftentimes in these conversations, there's always talk about like, how do you get your resources? How do you get your money? Like what's the, financing is always, the black pit hole that we fall into in these types of conversations, but especially in Indigenous spaces, and all of your knowledge and experience really spoke to this, that it's that the interrelationships, like the Palina, the connections that we make with each other, with the land, with our ancestors, with our families, always will hold way more power than the financial sort of elements of filmmaking. And it's just really beautiful to see in all of your responses how that manifests itself in different ways. And so just thank you all so much for sharing of that knowledge and experience, and for just making the films that you made just so moving, and it's really inspiring to see. And we're at the end of our time, so I just want to acknowledge everyone's brilliance in this space. And I just really want to mahalo the Arizona International Film Festival, the Made in Hawaii Film Festival, each of you filmmakers, John, Zoe, the whole crew. It's a pleasure co-moderating with you, Amy, and all the audiences who are tuning in now. Thank you for joining us, and have a great rest of your day. And we hope that this sheds some light on Indigenous filmmaking practices. And Amy, I'll pass it to you for closing, any other closing statements.
I think you wrapped it up pretty well. I just wanted to extend thanks as well. So thanks to all of you for joining us. And also we have people from the audience chiming in to say thank you through the chat as well. So thanks to the filmmakers and to Arizona Film Fest and Made in Hawaii Film Fest. So Zoe, Taylour, could you say something a little bit about the Film Fest coming up in Hawaii? Is it something we can watch online, or do we have to be in Hawaii to see it?
Oh, good question. I mean the Made in Hawaii Film Festival?
Yes.
I kind of want to ping it to Zoe because I don't know all the details, but everyone should be super excited for it.
I think Zoe's responding saying mostly in person, but we do have somebody in the audience asking, maybe this is a great closing question for everybody. How can they see your films? So if anyone has any thoughts on how they're available. To all of you on the panel, someone would love to know how to see your films if they missed it last night, or
I can speak on behalf of Zoe and the Made in Hawaii Film Festival. It is in person. So it is in person this year. Zoe and the team have been dealing with COVID, and they're really excited to actually be in person. So if you're not here, unfortunately, you won't be able to see it online, but she invites you. We all invite you to come to the beautiful Hawaii Islands, the Big Island, and watch it in person. Made in Hawaii Film Festival, to see our films.
All right, sounds good. That's a great way to close, I think. Looking forward to the next film fest we gather again, right?
Also, Keli'i's film and my film are also brought to you also by Pacific Islanders and Communications. So eventually it's possible that we might have a PBS run. It's up to them, obviously. They don't tell us, but they do have that first right of refusal after we do our festival run. So I think I haven't seen Luke your film yet, but I really want to. So yeah, we'll all be looking out for each other's films in the festival run, and then we'll see what happens with them after that. But there will be a life for them after, whether it's online or on PBS for another year or whatnot. But there's always a way. I think all of us have Instagram pages, and social media. So that's a really good way to find out where the film is screening next, if it's coming to a local, where you are locally, or whether it's going to be online or on television.
Excellent. Taylor, do you want to send us off here?
Aloha nui, everybody. Ahui ho, till we meet again. This was awesome. Support these filmmakers and other Indigenous filmmakers, and the world would be a better place.
All right. Thank you, everyone.